Hello everyone, welcome to the Artefacto YouTube channel. My name is Jessica Bryant. Today I'm going to talk about the importance of composition in painting. To create a great watercolor painting, it's important to carefully plan. You want to choose a reference that allows you to craft a high quality composition. Why is composition so important? It's the foundation in all art forms. The structure that supports everything else makes it interesting and compels the viewer to engage with your work. In the next 20 minutes, I'll share with you my approach for planning a painting, which can help you learn to create stronger compositions that take your work to the next level. There's a lot of detail here. Please watch the full video, and you might find it helpful to take some notes or watch it again. So if, there's so many different ways to do this with just a few minutes, this is gonna be really tough. If this is the piece of paper I'm working on, there's the idea, if you get a lot of the books on composition, you'll see things like there's the T or the S or an X. And something I run across people doing often is misunderstanding what that means. So let's just say if we have a T composition, that would look like something like that on your paper. What that's referring to is how your value structure aligns within the dimensions of the surface you're working on. So if I'm in a rectangle here, a T might look something like this. And what people will do is line their subject matter up with that. So maybe, I don't know, maybe horizon line and a tree or something, and they'll think that, oh, my subject matter matches. And so that's the composition I'm in. And okay, so let's say I did that. We'll just make this really silly. Here's my little tree. And if I've got a horizon line, there's my main landscape, and maybe I've got some other trees, but they're down in here. And maybe it was a cloudy day, and so I've got some clouds, and maybe my sky was dark, dark blue. So it's pretty strong value. And when I say value, I should stop real quick. Value means how light or dark something is. So this is a range of values from the white of my paper to the darkest I can get with this particular pigment, and then different grays in between. So we're talking about value, we're talking about how light or dark something is. And so anything we have, the entire world is made up of all these abstract shapes, like I said, that each have a value. So when we're looking at composition, if I have a fairly dark landscape, let's say this is springtime and it's these rich dark greens in the grass, and I've got some trees that are very similar value of green, and my sky is at rich dark blue. So I have this kind of darker value that gradually fades to lighter the horizon, but then these bright white cloud shapes up there. I don't know if this is, hopefully this is reading well enough. So what I actually have here, if you squint at it, does not match this at all. What I have here is really more of a block here. And then I've got two little light shapes here. Again, I'm going very fast to this. This is not really the main focus today, but it is very important, so I'll mention it. This is not this shape. If I want to match this shape with this same scene, then what I need to be looking at is I need to find a subject. Maybe I have that tree, but maybe I need it needed to have been, say, autumn, when the grasses are dry and very light colored. So that's a lighter value. And then maybe I need some bushes or a line of trees on my horizon that's pretty dark. Now I've got a compositional structure that matches this. Another way to get that same style might be if you had like a rocky cliff and a waterfall coming down. And then maybe again, you have a sky that's just kind of a darker to lighter. And let's just say this is rocky shapes, but for our intent, it's just a value. And it's maybe a medium value overall. It would have different lights and darks in it, of course, to define different shapes. But you see how there again, we're getting a little bit into a T shape. It's value structure, not subject matter, which is really tricky to learn. And again, that's a whole nother concept. I really hope you enjoy this lesson. It's actually a small part of my 3 Keys to Success in Painting workshop. If you want to watch the full video right now, follow the link in the description and register for free. I really want everyone to succeed in painting. I hope my lessons will help you do that. Watercolor can be challenging. It requires thinking differently than in other painting mediums. Taking the time to plan your painting before you start can make the painting process feel easier and more enjoyable, and it really offers a chance to avoid some of the common struggles.
But the idea of composition in general and the idea of eye movement is, if you imagine, if you were, say, in a room, like let's say this is a room and it's completely dark and somebody turns on a flashlight. What are you going to look at in the room? The flashlight, because that's the one thing to see and look at. So if we had one flashlight to turn on in a room, where would be the most interesting place to put it in that room? We put it right in the center. We put it right in the center. And I know this is dark on light instead of light like a flashlight in a dark room, but bear with me. That's kind of predictable. We're going to have very similar lighting on all four of our walls. Our corners are all going to be dark. Sure, we're going to look at the flashlight, but we're not really going to look at the rest of the room very much. What if we moved the location of that flashlight and put it maybe up over in here? Now we've got one wall that's going to be lighter, one that's going to be a little darker but still light, one that's going to be darker yet, and one that's going to be the darkest. Each corner will have a little bit different lighting. Now, of course, you're still going to look at the flashlight first, but maybe each of those walls starts to get a little interesting because they're all slightly different from each other, and yet they relate to each other. And then if we were to add more lights in, where would we put those? So this could be circles, could be lights. It's just shape, light and dark value, and then the shape and the location within your page. So if the idea is, here's your piece of paper that you're going to paint on, how can you best use this space in a way that's interesting to a viewer and makes them want to keep looking at what you're doing? And that comes down to, you want to have interesting things in all corners, but interesting does not mean lots of detail, does not mean lots of bright color, it does not mean any of those things. The eye is drawn to the greatest point of contrast first, and contrast is light versus dark. So if you have a huge point of contrast, which in this case, we've got one big dark circle and a field of white, we're going to look at the big dark circle. If I do a second circle that's smaller, we're going to look at the bigger one first because that's the greatest contrast. Now, that doesn't mean that you didn't, for some reason, look at the other one first sometimes. It just means that generally, once you're looking at this, you're drawn to this greater point of contrast first. And then we're going to go to the next point of contrast. And then as you start to get more detailed or add more kinds of things in, you might think about, well, how am I placing these? What's an interesting way? There is no one right answer. This gets really complicated, and for me, really exciting. Composition is where I get really excited in my work. It all comes in the planning stage, and it really is something that can feed your intent and purpose. So I can craft a compositional structure that supports the mood that I'm after. So maybe that's high drama, high value contrast in several places. Maybe it's very quiet and softer, more gentle value contrasts, but also where I put these. So you might have a subject matter, I'll talk about this later too, that's very cluttered, has a lot of things going on. A great example would be like a street scene filled with people. And for me, in a landscape, a landscape with all of these trees and all of the water and all of the things, and some of the ones that you saw earlier are like that. There's a lot going on. I frequently have people tell me, oh, you paint so much detail on every last thing. And I really, truly don't, because for me, that changes the impact of what I want to create with my work. And if you really look close, there's a lot of areas that are far more abstract. I'm just choosing to make shapes in a way that implies what the subject matter is. And if I define the shapes of a few trees, then when I have similar kinds of shapes but missing detail further away, it tricks the mind into thinking that those have all the same detail because you can understand what's happening in those. It's like how a silhouette of a person really can look just like them. Some time ago it was popular to trace people's profile and just make this is gonna be terrible, but making getting somebody to stand against a wall and taking a piece of paper, and then you trace the shadow of their head. That was popular. I don't know the time period, but I've seen these in history books, and you can tell who the person is by nature of just that outline. And same for most things. The outline of a tree defines that item is a tree versus something else. You don't need a whole lot of detail. which might sound funny coming from somebody who paints a lot of detail. It is not necessary. It's a choice for me, but I also choose how do I use that? Because also, as far as my compositional structure, while value is the main driver, there is a component with color and with the arrangement of shapes, or not shapes, I'm sorry, subject matter and the amount of detail you use. So maybe the eye would be drawn after looking at our value structure, then you might be pulled into areas that have more detail versus less detail. And so balancing how you use that throughout your piece really helps make a more compelling finished work. So back to value structure, if you have a really complex scene, and I will show this at the end with some examples of my own photo references, it's important to think about how to simplify what you're looking at in terms of understanding the composition. So when we have all kinds of things happening in an image, if you squint at it enough, you can pare down and lose a lot of that detail and see where are the larger value shapes happening. You know, do I have, you know, maybe it's a mountain scene and I have a dark hillside in front, and maybe I have a lighter hillside further away and it's lighter just because it's further away. And then maybe I have some light cloud shapes that get defined by a gradual dark to light. Now, I might have flowers all over these fields, but if you were, you know, standing 200 feet away from my painting, you wouldn't be able to see any of the flowers. You would only be seeing the value of these overarching shapes, the larger shape that the combination of all these smaller shapes makes. And that's defined by where the values change, which may or may not line up with your actual subject matter. So thinking about composition and value as separate from what your subject matter is doing is really important. And I will come back to that here. So that was the idea of composition. When you're looking at a photo reference, it's really important to think about things like, what is the compositional structure in my reference? Is it something that's quality enough to use, or should I skip this reference? As much as I might love it, if it's not going to make it easy for me to make a good painting, I want to think hard about whether or not I still want to try to make that painting. Maybe you do, and just know that it comes with a high risk of being unhappy with your results. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you need an easier win. You need to pick something that's ready to go that you can just apply some of your skills to and know that you're going to like the outcome. No one right way for any of this. It has to be what suits you. I just really hope to instill the idea in you today to pay attention to yourself and where you're at. And that can change with every painting. My approach with each painting changes, and I try to pay attention to where's my mood at? Do I feel confident today? Do I feel uncertain today? I don't want to approach a painting confidently if I'm feeling just tired and off and not really focused, because there's a good chance I'm going to do things not in a way I would have wanted to do them. It's important for me to match my approach to where I'm at, not just what my goals are, but also how am I actually feeling, and can I do this the way that I want to be doing it, or do I need to come up with a different way? And again, I'll say you're intelligent. You can problem solve. You can find a way to make something work for you. It just helps to have someone tell you that you get to think about that. You get to pay attention to what your needs are and approach work in a way that works for you. So when you're looking at your reference, another important thing is what's the quality, like the visual quality, or I can't think of the right word for it. What does your reference look like? Does it have enough detail that you can see what it is that you're trying to do? Or are you going to be having to make things up because you can't quite see what's happening? And of course, if you have to make things up, that's a little riskier. So I've got one example here. This is an image I've painted before. I'm actually planning to paint it again here soon. And I have it very small on purpose. I have a larger one as well. And I started with small because if you were going to paint this and you just have this teeny tiny reference and you're doing a really large painting, you might struggle depending on how long you've been painting and how familiar you are with the subject matter. You might find it kind of tricky when you get into areas where you're painting something this big, but in your photo reference, it's this big and you can't quite see what's happening. It takes some skills to have already worked on and developed to be able to decide what to do in that space and be pretty sure that you're going to like the outcome. So it's a great tool to just make your image larger. You could even, I did this for an example, you could print a version that's as large as you want to paint. And this is maybe, a little less than a half sheet. Let's say I want to do this larger painting. I like the color quality of this better, but I could use both. I could have this to be able to see, oh yeah, I can see the shapes. This is a good enough photograph that even up close, I can see some of the shapes. That does not mean I want to paint them all, because I personally don't. But if I have the information in front of me, I can make better choices about how to simplify it than if I don't have the information in front of me. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So like this mountain shape back here, if you squint with me, this is largely one cohesive shape. It's a little darker on top. It gets a little lighter. And maybe there's a couple areas where we can see some kind of value happening, but otherwise it's just a little textured. Overall, it feels a little bit textured. So that's what you need to worry about. If you're trying to make it look believable, that's what you worry about. And then how much detail goes into that is completely up to you. I will approach that in lots of different ways, again, depending on my mood, depending on the day. But it's important to have a reference that you can really see so you understand what's happening and can make your own choices about what you want to do and how you want to handle what's happening in them. So when I'm looking at this and considering, boy, I like the color quality of this, but it's probably easier for you to see the larger one here. I have these other photographs from the same area, just looking a little bit over to the side. And these aren't very great photographs, but I just wanted to show you an example. I really love the mood and the color and the lighting on these, at least the way they look on my computer. And it was really disappointing to me. This was from an experience I had some years ago, and I really wanted to get to paint this area. And I did not, because neither of these set me up to have a very good finished painting. The shapes in this one, if you squint with me, we talk about composition, we have kind of a lighter shape here with these light verticals, and almost makes a W in here, which is just kind of awkward. It's not very compelling. I've got darker shapes on either side that kind of match each other. These shapes, I don't know, kind of match each other. It's not very compelling to me. We've got a lighter shape here and light through the clouds, mostly a band of dark down here. So what we're looking at, it's my piece of paper. What we're looking at in our composition here is, maybe something. I should keep these unified. Something like that. And then we've got a lighter shape in here and here. So this gets tricky. Ideally, in a value study, which is what I'm doing here, you're going to limit yourself to maybe 3 values, a light, dark, and a medium. And squinting is kind of how you figure out where those values are.
Jessica, after a few minutes, we're going to move on, just so you are aware of that.
Sure.
You can plan from that space.
So this is just not particularly compelling to me compared to my option with this painting, which was similar mood. And this is part of how I make my decisions, is I look at what's possible with composition. I'm going to switch to the smaller one really quick, just to give you another idea here. I could also come in to evaluate whether I want to use this as is. We call these L maps. And I can use this to try cropping. And maybe there's several different paintings I could find in here that are more interesting than keeping my photograph exactly as it is. So I'm looking at, I've got a large light area here, light, 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 light. What's a way to make those patterns of light on dark be in an interesting location that keeps the eye moving throughout my piece, is kind of the idea. Again, this could be a whole topic for many, 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 many lessons of topics. And just super quick, another example, I had a photograph. Here's the printed out on my computer, a little bit larger, and you'll see that the camera makes this just very, very dark. I did not love this as is. I did decide to paint it, and I made some distinct choices in how I changed some of my values, but kept overall a similar value structure. I'm not saying that I love how my painting turned out. we can all be endlessly self-critical about that. And I'm actually thinking about repainting this one. This one, unfortunately, while it was shipping between locations for an exhibit, was part of a horrific accident, and the entire shipping truck crashed and burned, and all of the artwork inside was destroyed. So that's part of why I think I'm going to paint it again, because I like the idea. I'm not necessarily thrilled with this, with what my outcome was, and I think I could do better. And since the painting doesn't even exist anymore, I'm going to try it again. And that would be a good spot for us to pause.
I hope this video is helpful for you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we assist all individuals in mastering the skills of painting and immersing themselves in the wonderful world of art. Don't forget to follow the link in the video description and register for my course. See you there soon.